I am not about to take some Edward Sharpe slander. Many of you have seen on the internet recently a prevalent opinion that the indie folk pop of the late 2000s is making its rounds on the internet, and it's being deemed the worst genre ever. And then the Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros Tiny Desk performance of the song Home is being discussed as possibly the worst song ever. This is so out of context, it's outrageous. First of all, look, I'm with you. If you extract like the corniest part of any genre, any movement, yeah, you could make it look really, really bad. And to be honest, by the time this whole thing hit the early 2010s, because again, with Edward Sharpe's Home, we're talking 2009. So by the time this hits 2011, 2012, you've got a whole bunch of sound-alikes. And yeah, it was ridiculous by then. I mean, look, at the time, Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros Home dropped, and that wasn't the lead single from that album. The lead single was 40 Day Dream. It's actually a really good album, Up From Below. That's the debut Edward Sharpe album from 2009. Quite frankly, I like their sophomore album Here that kicks off with Man on Fire even more, but that's a whole other discussion. We'll get into that a little bit. But pertaining to this phenomenon, when Edward Sharpe's Home dropped, I would say my favorite band in that folky genre would probably be Fleet Foxes. Like, they had just dropped a phenomenal self-titled debut album in 2008. I still think that that's Fleet Foxes' best work. But again, you've got to have context around Home in particular. This is before Father John Misty was recording with that name. He was still Jay Tillman. This is before Tame Impala rose to prominence. 2009 was before a lot of stuff. And so when Home dropped, this was pretty unique in the current music landscape. And this wasn't trying to drive home like a trend of, what do they call it now? The stomp, clap, hey, like that whole hey ho. No, this was something that was authentic at the time. I mean, listen to those performances, listen to those vocal performances. And Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, I feel has been so misunderstood and hasn't quite been given a fair shake. Like, if you look at the lead singer, Alex Ebert, listen to his vocal qualities. And if you've seen him live and seen them live, which I have multiple times, you see that there's like an improvisational quality in Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. That's a part of the magic, quite frankly. And it was the vocal play between Alex Ebert and Jay Castrinos that adds to that magic. Like, you can almost hear the smiles on the faces of those performers. Like, they're having a genuinely good, fun time. This thing sounds like it was actually recorded in a musical commune, a commune full of brilliant musicians who have the knack for timing, using any instrument in the book or a whistle or something that is very unconventional and making it work in the context of the song and just allowing it to lift the song, make the song more fun. Like, just listen to that opening whistle of the song. Listen to that whip that cracks right before they get into that opening verse. And yes, over time, you're gonna hit valleys and peaks in terms of any song, any genre, where all of a sudden it's looked at as being corny or hokey. But then trust me, as the years go on, this is going to be reappreciated. I do think that there's going to be a point where it is seen for what it actually is, which is actually a really good song that was also very timely. But yes, after this song dropped, and Alex Ebert, explains this on his Instagram, go look up his response to this whole controversy about, is Home the worst song ever? Is Home a good song, bad song? Listen to his response. Home is a very authentic, genuine song, and it's on a very good album that has, again, 40 Day Dream, Janglin', the title track Up From Below, this beautiful song called Brother. Like, this album is stacked. And again, their second album from 2012, Here, in my view, even better, that had Man on Fire, which turn that up and listen to all the little musical nuance, listen to all the little subtle things that are going on, from the background vocals, the instrumentation, the hums, the things that you could barely hear, but they are permeating throughout the song and you don't even realize that it's there. Very interesting stuff. But that album has Dear Believer, it has All Washed Out, it has One Love to Another. I love that Here album. One of my favorite albums from 2012, and quite frankly, Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, for the short run that they had from 2008, 2009 to about I mean, they had a 2016 album, but the magic of Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros was gone probably by 2013, 2014. I would say that. But that was a moment in time. And if you missed it, you missed it. I would urge you to go revisit it. But that was actually a very beautiful thing that they had. Really, the beginning of the end was when Jade Castrinos left the band, or whether she was kicked out. It's kind of cloudy in terms of how it actually went down. But that spelled the beginning of the end of Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. But yeah, the chemistry that they had, Alex and Jade, listen to their voices, their vocal qualities. Like Alex Ebert has a very interesting register, and he's very talented at like backing his own vocal up. So he'll be doing something in a lower register and you could faintly hear the very high pitched Alex Ebert on top of that. And they have other very talented musicians. Nora Fitzpatrick, she would usually be playing, I think, the accordion. She's also an actress. Christian Letts, Crash Dane Doodle. They've had a motley crew of very talented musicians throughout that ensemble. But the chemistry between Alex and Jade, pure magic. And Jade's got this soulful voice, like, and when she sings, it sounds like she could be singing from like a whole field away, and that the spirit of her voice will still reach and cut through the air in a very honest way. Again, I love this band, but I do feel you, because after the success of Home, which was successful when it dropped, it was one of those indie gems, like what was that? Young Folks by Peter, Bjorn, and John. That was from a couple years prior, but that little era's got a whole bunch of those indie bops. Home is one of the best ones, or at least one of the most prominent ones. It's almost like, you know, MGMT's Time to Pretend or something. But after that dropped, with its uniqueness, really uniqueness, you had a whole bunch of sound-alikes. And as I was saying, Alex Ebert, the frontman of Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, who's also done some very good solo stuff. Two really good albums that I'm aware of. Like there's the album Alexander with the opener Let's Win, like beautiful song that kicks off that album. And he had a more recent one in I think 2020 called I and I. But he explains what happened with that song and in the wake of the song. Basically, like the Edward Sharpe agent became either of Monsters and Men or the Lumineers, one or the other, became like their manager and basically said, essentially do what they're doing. So you had these sound-alikes. You had that Lumineers single, which look, I love indie folk when it's done right. I don't like it when it's done in a way where it's like, okay, we're hopping on something popular. Let's take the most, put your lighters in the air and wave your hand back and forth part of this phenomenon, and let's just beat that to the ground and make a hot single out of that. I hate that. Look, we always see very talented trailblazers, if you will, creative trailblazers get overshadowed by their more either industry backed or timely and ultimately more successful, more popular sound-alikes. They're copycats. And when I heard the Lumineers and I heard like of Monsters and Men, it drove me crazy, because all of a sudden you had a whole wave of new fans loving the Lumineers. And I'm thinking, oh God, like, have you heard Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros? Like, that's where I was. Look, I remember being an early fan of the early Avett Brothers music, like their emotionalism, early stuff. I'm talking the Gleams, like before they did that I and Love and You project with Rick Rubin. I'm talking early Avett Brothers. Well, after that, you got Mumford and Sons that totally overshadowed the Avett Brothers. And I was like, oh no. And I'm not saying that there's nothing good about Mumford and Sons or that they don't have any good music, or look, every artist hopefully has their own thing going for them. All I'm saying is it was very peculiar and very frustrating to see the wave of, look, me and my boys who were kind of into this, like we called it stadium folk when you had stuff like the Lumineers coming out that just kind of perverted what was actually a pretty cool thing. Again, they extracted the most usable, commoditizable, exploitable piece of this new subgenre, or this new thing that was going on in the subgenre, and they just beat that like a dead horse, and it became more popular. And yeah, over time, people just rolled their eyes at it like, what the hell was that? But if you look at Home by Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros in a vacuum, beautiful song on a beautiful album. Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, you might blame them for what came after them, but They didn't do that. They just did what they did. They can't control what the industry does to respond to something that was actually pretty authentic and fun and creative and genuine. No, they just did what they did. And again, I would urge you, listen to that album Up From Below, and then listen to the second album Here. And remember, there's a really good Alex Ebert solo album in between those called Alexander. Listen to those three and you'll get the gist of why Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros is one of my favorite bands of the past, 20 years or so. Seriously, they're that good. I would say Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, as I said, Fleet Foxes were my favorite when Edward Sharpe dropped in that genre. And since then, I love Girls and Christopher Owens, who is actually making one hell of a comeback this past year. But yeah, it really frustrated me to see this new news of people really clowning Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. Look, it was kind of tongue-in-cheek when they were putting on their accents, their Appalachian accents, like, oh, I love my ma and pa. Like, that was tongue-in-cheek. They weren't trying to convince you that they were from the South or Appalachia or anything like that. And if you listen to their music, you get the fun vibe where it's almost come one, come all. They're like, you could feel like they are inviting you to their party. And look, one of my favorite concerts that I've ever been to, I think we went back in 2013 or 2014. It was the Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros Big Top concert. It was like in this almost circus tent with a revolving platform in the middle, so every section of the audience got equal attention. So this thing is, they're playing on this platform that's circling, and so at one point this side of the crowd sees them up front face to face. A couple minutes later, it's the other side of the crowd that sees them face to face. Great idea. It was a blast of a concert. And again, the chemistry within the band, it's a beautiful thing to witness. And I remember when Jay left the band and I'm like, oh, it was pretty heartbreaking because of how beautiful the music that they all made together was between, again, 2009 to 2013-ish. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. Look, if you're not into indie folk at all and you're not into any of it, like you were never into Elliott Smith or Sufjan Stevens, you don't like Van Morrison's Astro Weeks, you don't like anything in that folkish rock vibe, then maybe Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros isn't for you. But if you are open to it, it doesn't get much better than that. Now, you might have your opinion if you are into the genre, and you could give me, artists within that subgenre that you like more. But for me, song by song and just creating pure magic, again, this felt like it was lightning in a bottle. It felt like everybody involved was having a blast. Again, they could play just about any instrument in the book and make it work on a particular song. And they did that for those first couple Edward Sharpe albums. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on all this. I just couldn't sit by and watch Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros get clowned like that. And their reputation, I hope, at some point re-emerges and there is a newfound appreciation for Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. Because again, quite frankly, it was a beautiful thing. I mean, look, not only do I love Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros, but my whole family does. Like it's my brother's a huge fan, as big a fan as I am. He, was putting me on to like the third and fourth album, like just highlighting certain gems on those subsequent albums. And my sister, at her wedding, I think she walked into one of the processions in the beginning of the wedding was that song Home, which is why I titled this The Edward Sharpe Debate Hits Home, because I actually have a lot of personal investment into Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. I feel like, just by proxy and through absorption of the music, me, myself individually, and my family, I feel deeply connected to the music of Edward Sharpe and the Magnetic Zeros. So yeah, I'm not here for the slander. Let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you love music like I do. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.